I was always interested in the concept of LSD because from what I was told, like, you know, your perception of reality kind of changes. And being someone who is very creative and comes up with these very abstract ideas, that sounded really interesting to me. And so after doing a lot of research, I realized that the effects are not what I was raised to think they were. I thought there was going to be like purple elephants popping in and out of space and floating around and stuff. And I realized that it's much more based in reality, even though your perception of it is kind of shifting. You're not like hallucinating things, right? And so I had a friend who said that he could get me some if I was interested. And I had another friend who had never done it before. And so we all decided, hey, let's all get together. Me and my friend who hadn't done it would take it, and my friend who had would kind of babysit us, which I highly recommend if that's something you were interested in doing. You definitely want someone who has gone through it to be there with you.
So have someone who is not on a drug that has been through it to be there with you.
It can be a very, very intense experience, especially your first time. And so long story short, you know, I was interested in it. I got a hold of it after doing some research, and I actually decided to log everything that I experienced. And I actually have an 18-page Google Doc of my entire experience that I logged.
Wow. Is there anything from that Google Doc that kind of stands out to you?
Oh, yeah. I will dive into that for sure.
100%. I'm super fascinated by any real-time LSD documenting of what went down.
Yeah, dude. So the first time I ever did it, I thought I was taking LSD, and it turned out to be research chemicals, which are very similar in terms of effects, but they're of a different compound, and they're actually more dangerous than taking LSD. LSD is actually fairly safe unless you take an absolutely absurd amount. These are a little bit less, I guess, like regulated. And so my experience was slightly different because of that. But
so it's like an imitation about LSD almost? Yeah,
kind of just like
a different synthetic alternative.
Exactly. Like a synthetic alternative that has similar effects, but it does react slightly differently.
Okay.
But man, the first things when you take LSD is like, it takes a while to kick in. It takes like about an hour. You don't really expect it, and it starts creeping up on you. You start feeling maybe a little nauseous, maybe a little like, ooh, I feel tingly. And it's not until like 45 minutes in when you start looking around and you're like, wait a minute, like my wall looks like it's breathing. And you can start seeing like almost everything kind of flows in and out a little bit. And lines start to wiggle, they start to move. As I was trying to write down in this log, you know, like a standard notebook paper, the blue lines are like wiggling in and out, and my letters are getting all jumbled. And it got to the point where it was really hard for me to write. I had to do like voice to text. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was inside, and I walked outside, and I just went, holy shit. I was looking at the road and the grass flowing like waves, literally going like up and down and just flowing. And I knew in my mind that wasn't real. Like I was aware that this isn't reality, but I was perceiving it in this way. And it's honestly a lot for your mind to handle the first time, because you've literally just never seen that before, you know? And so your mind's taking a second to kind of process it. And in other experiences, I've walked into a room that was a sphere. Like it literally had no corners or edges. And I was like, this does not seem right.
Yeah.
And I don't know, everything starts getting kind of enhanced. As I like looked down, I walked through a forest, and I literally took like 2 steps, but it felt like hours. And other times I walked through an entire park, and it felt like a second. And the trees felt beautiful, and I watched leaves sprout other leaves within it that were sprouting more leaves, and things started turning into fractals, and everything was just beautiful and lovely, and I felt like a kid in a playground, just like I can start maybe morphing reality. Like I can make these trees wiggle if I think about it, or if I think the color green, it suddenly like illuminates and glows. And as I'm having this awesome kind of childlike experience, I start thinking, I miss my mom. And in that moment, all of this beautiful fun that I was having ceased to exist. And these trees that were like waving and dancing now felt like a cage that I was like locked in. And I started just crying like uncontrollably, because I just in that moment felt so alone and just empty. Like the sheer thought of just thinking I miss somebody changed my whole perception of everything. And it took me a while to kind of mentally get out of that. I literally sat down in the forest for like a full hour, just crying. And then what snapped me out of it was I saw the sunset, and I decided to leave the forest and go out to this giant hill so I could watch the sunset. And that kind of started shifting my mind. And so that started making me realize like how much your emotions really transform your perception of reality, not just in a drug-induced state, but also in real life. And that's kind of why I enjoy taking those types of psychedelics. Is I'm not taking it to have fun or to party. I'm kind of taking it to learn about myself and, you know, how I feel about certain things, because I think it allows you to almost look at situations objectively and maybe from a third party perspective, and kind of help you work through your emotions on those things. And I think I would be wary to try it unless you were willing to deal with some pretty intense emotions and maybe even some dark thoughts or experiences you had in the past, because that may come up with a single word or just by looking at something, and that's something that you will have to deal with and go through. But I think it forces you to face it, and if you have a buddy there to help you through that, I think it can be really transformative to once you get out of that experience.
That's beautiful, and it sounds super transformative. I've never done a full dose of psychedelics to the point where I'm losing touch with reality, where it's morphing into something else. I've experimented with microdosing, and so I'm very interested in what full-blown psychedelic experiences are like, and there's a lot to unpack there. I wanted to get into the emotional aspect. So you mentioned that the openness of the trees you were experiencing shifted when you had the thought that you missed your mom. So that one emotional thought, that entrance into your mind of missing your mom, completely transformed the emotional the emotional experience from within yourself, completely transformed the visual experience that you were taking in. Everything shifted once that emotion hit you visually.
Yeah, I mean, it legitimately felt like a nice warm, orange bright forest now turned into dark cold, like desaturated. And again, these trees that at one time were like dancing and having fun were now like the bars of a cage that I was locked in. And yeah, it literally happened in a split second. There wasn't like a sudden shift. It's like I blinked and bam, my perception changed.
How did you work through that emotionally tough period of the trip? Because a lot of people experience, the bad trips. People say the worst thing that can happen to you is things turning bad or dark, and then you start to want to make things different, and then the fact that you're trying to push away the dark shit only makes them worse. How did you work through that emotionally darker moment where things start to feel like a cage to come back to an experience that sounds like it was overwhelmingly positive? In the like, looking back on it, it sounds like a positive experience. How did you get through that darker moment to transform it back into something where you ultimately felt like at peace going through the trip as a whole?
Yeah, so one crazy thing happened to me in this moment as I'm talking about missing my mom and thinking about it. I think this was the research chemicals. I've never experienced this on LSD before, but as I'm thinking about my mom, I felt like literally her spirit came to me, and I was almost like taken to this new place. I was still in the forest, but I felt like I was in a new space, and I was communicating with the spirit of my mom, who wasn't the present day version of my mom. It was literally her like soul, her past, present, and future selves, like her essence. And it came to me in this moment that I was just sobbing and sobbing, and she told me that, you know, everything's going to be okay. And she said she wanted to show me something. And in this moment, I felt as though I experienced my entire life through her eyes, through her perspective. And I saw and I felt the love she had for me, and you know, the laughter of watching me grow up and make stupid mistakes, and the sadness of when, you know, I yelled at her or did something that made her upset. And I had this full experience in what felt like forever, but was literally probably just a few minutes. And at the end of that, I felt so much peace because I knew that she loved me, and I got to truly witness that, at least in my perspective. And I think that, coupled with this beautiful sunset that was starting to occur, I think helped me shift the mindset a little bit and be more at peace with the situation. And then, you know, I got to walk out of this forest with this newfound peace.